Chapter 28, Blum. And then, the story started wriggling around like a snake. One you think you can befriend, saying to yourself, perhaps this snake isn't like all the others. Or perhaps, just perhaps, our thoughts on these creatures all come from our own wretched perspective, and maybe they aren't as monstrous as we imagine them to be. At first, the work together was incredibly exciting. My pulse raced from the opportunity. Here I was, this little plum from the forest, getting the chance to work with a top scientist in my field. Just moments ago, I was a lowly intern, a gopher logging in samples and studies, like a small child trying to reach the shoulders of the great giants who surrounded me, doing all the important work. But, having come from the streets, having lost my and believing I wouldn't make it, that I would end up lost to the forest as so many had been, this was quite something compared to how I imagined I would meet my end. I had a roof over my head, enough money to buy frozen dumplings and ingredients for a decent stir-fry every day, and tea to keep me going through the long hours of work each night. I had no family, no great love of my life, but I had long ago made my peace with my solitude. Most days that I worked with Dr. Frank, I couldn't quite believe my own eyes. The work was very complex, actually, and we spent weeks and weeks calculating everything. Dr. Frank showed me her video archives of the early experiments with the pygmy tarsiers, the early stages of Hannah's pregnancy. It was only after she showed me the videos of Hannah that Dr. Frank admitted to me that she had snuck into the hospital after Hannah died and stolen preserved tissue from Hannah. She had it frozen in the lab for future use. If she had to go about this again, maybe she could at least go about it in the right way. In those early days, Dr. Frank told me she imagined they would make multiple children together, and even if Hannah wouldn't always be the surrogate for those experiments, she had hoped Hannah wouldn't mind using her own materiality so Dr. Frank could perfect this ongoing search for how to make the perfect child. I did question whether it was a good idea for Dr. Frank to use the material from someone who meant so much to her, who brought such associations with the deepest forms of loss. Would it make it difficult for Dr. Frank to relinquish this new child to Ash? Given that Hannah most likely did not carry the genetic mutation that caused Ash's disability, would it be more difficult for Ash to attach to the child? Would this be what Ash wanted? But what did I know compared to Dr. Frank? It wasn't my place to say. I was just thrilled to have a seat at the table. We didn't spend all of our time working. When the weather was nice, Dr. Frank would surprise me, out of the blue, and pull me swinging out of my chair, a kind of intimacy that made the hairs on my arms dance, and take us out for a canoe ride on a nearby lake, or suggest I accompany her on an impromptu picnic at City Park. These moments were a much-needed break from the grueling hours of study and the harsh neon light of the lab. But, looking back now, I can see those outings were meant to blur my surroundings with such confusion, too, such excitement. During one picnic, I looked up after fixing a slice of cheese on a wheat cracker, only to catch Dr. Frank's gaze steadfastly directed at me. "Yes, Dr. F?" I inquired sheepishly, unsure of how to respond to such a change in the pulse of our dynamic after we had already embarked on this new, more electrifying project together, one rife with risk and drama. The corners of her mouth turned up ever so slightly. I couldn't help but be taken in by her, the largeness of her and what she meant to me, by the attention she deigned to give to someone as small and unworthy as me. Such a sensitive story, one that could certainly threaten her career, and yet it was me she chose for this mission. Me she trusted with this confidence, as if all of the worth and importance of my entire life was wrapped up in the package of Dr. Frank alone. "Please, call me Z, or anything you like, really. Just don't call me something so formal as doctor, not when we are making such important and intimate work together." My hand trembled behind hers, which made her clasp mine even more firmly, and made the sigh within my chest mirror the quickening shudder of my hand. Okay, Z," I nervously offered back as an attempt to try to appear calm. I knew it wasn't working. "Is everything okay?" I tried to get at what was behind her gaze, which had intensified. I also didn't want to assume there was anything more behind it. "Oh yes, darling," she smiled again, her voice smooth as brandy. "I just like the look of you, if you don't mind." I just like to look at you, if you don't mind." With that, she placed a hand on my cheek. I was instantly a goner, taken with her in a completely different way than I was with Co. I felt out of control of myself, but also incredibly filled with the magnitude of what it meant for Dr. F to touch me. There was some part of me that felt this was all too much, too fast, too wild, too messy, too irrational. But I was alone. There was no one to witness the recklessness of what I was starting to surrender to with Dr. Frank. I imagined that even if there was, I would have been too swept up by its power to listen. We fell back on the blanket, and I let her take me, having no understanding what, exactly, of myself I was consenting to give.